Tenacious Talks is all about embracing the spirit of tenacity. Host Carrie Ann Barron, empowerment coach and business mentor, believes that with the right motivation, you can do anything you put your mind, heart, and soul into. Carrie Ann and her special guests share strategies and insights in this Tenacious Talk that will inspire you to live life and do business in a way that works for you and comes from your truth. And now, here is your host, Carrie Ann Barron.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Tenacious Talks. My name is Carrie Ann Barron and I am so excited to bring to you our guest today. Her name is CaraBee. And the topic of our conversation today is of a sensitive nature and yet a very important topic. So today, Cara will be talking to us about rape and sexual assault awareness. And she really wants to support survivors to step out of silence and shame and into healing and empowerment. So, Cara, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Are you excited to finally get in the spotlight and really share what's been going on with you and how you want to help others?
I am very excited because this is something that I'm very passionate about. It's a very important topic, like you said.
And you, not only in your bio, I'm not going to read your bio, we're just kind of going to go through it and have a bit of a conversation about it. One of the very first things I want to mention is that you're a member of RAIN, which is Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network, the Speakers Bureau. So you've been doing that for many years, sharing your story to help others survive and step out of silence. So what is it about that really intrigues you and called you to that platform?
You know, I don't totally remember. I think it was when I first started to work through what I had experienced, and I was all about anything that had the potential for healing. And I went online and discovered the RAIN network, and something about speaking out just really intrigued me. Because when I was growing up and experiencing the things that I didn't feel like I had a voice, nor did I feel like I could put words to what was happening to me or how I felt about it. So I would read books or listen to other people to help me find those words. And something sparked within me thinking, wow, maybe I can be that voice for someone else who's going through something similar. So that kind of inspired me to want to put myself out there and put my story out there.
Well, and what was it like trying to find the words to put your story so that you could share it? What was that like?
Yeah. Oh gosh, that was really, really challenging. I'm a person who loves words, and I love reading and I love writing. And yet I feel that in some situations, there aren't adequate words to really describe what something was like or what something felt like. So it was challenging, and it was also very liberating to know that I didn't have to stay silent and I didn't have to be ashamed, and that what I was saying could inspire someone without me even knowing it. And that's been the reason that I've continued to speak up about what I experienced, because if one word of what I say reaches one person and helps them to feel less shame or less fear, then that's why I do it.
Are you okay with sharing a little bit of your story right now?
Sure. I have a long history of sexual abuse and assault that began when I was a very young child and continued pretty much, I don't want to say constantly, but pretty consistently until I was 15 years old at the hands of various perpetrators. And when I was 15, I started to share some of what I had experienced, and it culminated in legal proceedings in court, and I was very caught up in that, in like the logistics of it, but I really didn't deal with the emotional piece until much later. And when I did that, it it felt like something that was so overwhelming. I didn't know how to begin to untangle this web of shame and secrets and abuse. And it took a while for me to do it, but I did. And while I was in the process, I never believed that I would come out the other side. And yet here I am. So, my story really is, I suppose, it was something that I look back on, and sometimes I'm not even really sure how I got through it. To think of a little girl experiencing so much abuse and being violated the way that I was, it still sometimes is hard for me to understand how that happened and how I'm still here today.
Well, I'm very glad you're here today. So I want to really acknowledge that. Thank you so much for sharing. I know there's a lot of us who have stories and we're not ready to share, or we haven't been able to find the words. So for you to be able to share the words you have already it's empowering. It really helps people who may have experienced this, male and female, to really know that it's okay. They're not alone, and there is another side to it, right? There is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes.
So something that came up for me while I was hearing you talking was, you said it was the emotional work that you did afterwards. So how did you start that emotional work, or what tools or skills did you apply to your life to support you in moving through that aspect of your healing?
Oh, wow. It was something that I didn't realize that I needed to do. I thought, okay, I told someone what happened and we went through this whole legal proceeding and now it's over. And I did not know about how it was still affecting me emotionally inside. So it actually, my healing from the assault and the abuse started when I lost my dad. He and I were very close, and he was diagnosed with cancer. And after he died, I felt really lost because he was one of the only people that I had totally felt safe with. And in working through the grief of losing my dad, because I did receive counseling for that, I kept feeling like this emotion, this other stuff inside of me that felt kind of bigger than me, and I didn't really understand that. And I was working with a counselor who said, she knew about my history, and she said, well, how often have you talked about that? Like, I know that you say that it happened, but how much have you really discussed it? And I was like, well, I really haven't. And it was in starting to talk about it and just acknowledge that it happened again, that it brought up a lot. It brought up a lot of repressed memories. It brought up a lot of anxiety, a lot of emotion. So I kind of dove into the healing process. I received a lot of counseling. I did a lot of energetic work. I did Reiki, with hands-on energy. I did some drama therapy. I did art therapy. And I'm also a theater performer, so I was able to pour a lot of my emotions into the different roles that I played. And all of those things together really helped me to express the things that had happened to me and the things that were going on inside of me in a lot of different ways.
It's amazing how the performing arts can really support people in releasing and expressing themselves in a very, I think, subtle way, yet very subtle way to the audience, but powerful for the individual.
Yes. I was, if I could share a little story about that.
Absolutely.
I was doing a production of The Diary of Anne Frank, and I toured with that production for quite a few years. And for the last few years, I played Anne. And there was a scene in the show where she has a nightmare. She is like ripped out of her sleep by a nightmare that the Gestapo is going to come and take her family away. And I was supposed to start the scene from a blackout to screaming at the top of my lungs, "No, no, no, don't touch me." And that was something that I had never done growing up when I was abused and raped. I was not allowed to say anything. I was punished for screaming or resisting. And so when I was faced with playing this role and having to do that, it brought tremendous anxiety. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Like, these things are words that I always had deep in my own soul. And now I'm supposed to like scream them in front of an audience. And I've never said them before. And so at rehearsals, it kind of was tough for me to do. But when we got to the performances, it's kind of like go time. Like, people are right there watching you. You either do it or you don't. And so I knew the cue that I had to look for in order to go, and it happened. And it like burst out of me. And the first time I did it, I really started to cry, which was appropriate for the scene, but nobody knew that the tears were not coming from a place of the character that I was playing. It was coming from my heart, because finally I had been able to say those words the way that I had always needed to say them. And I got to do that every night, every time we did the show. And that was very healing too, to be able to finally say, no, no, don't touch me, get off me, leave me alone.
That is, I had chills when you were sharing that. That must have been so liberating for you to be able to finally say the words that you've been wanting to say for so long, and
Yes.
yet on a very public stage.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was maybe the start of me realizing that I wanted to be more public about my story, because I did it in front of all these people, and then I wanted to like tell them, like, wait, guys, you don't know what a huge thing this was for me. But obviously I couldn't, because it was within the context of the script and not about my life. But in a lot of ways, it was about my life.
Yeah.
It really was.
And it's interesting that was the role you were cast in as well, right? Very powerful stuff.
Yes.
I want to keep talking, and I want to find out a little bit more about what your most challenging part of your journey, why you're choosing to really start to speak out now, and a couple of other questions about how you help your clients, because I understand that you are now a certified fearless living coach.
Yes.
So when we come back from a short break, I'd like to explore that aspect of your life. How does that sound?
Great.
Excellent.
I'd love to.
Okay, we'll be right back with Cara Bjornson.
Ladies, are you ready to rediscover your passion, but feel that your age may hold you back? It's time for you to feel re-inspired and connect with women just like yourself. Fabulousat50.com is an online community and magazine aimed to celebrate you. As mothers, wives, sisters, aunts, and friends, you are in the most vibrant time of your life. Embrace fabulous by exploring and creating new experiences. Ask, if not now, when? Answer that question by visiting Fabulousat50, that's number 50.com. This online community offers not just a great magazine, but also hosts fun and inspirational events. Fabulousat50.com, where your lifestyle is our motivation.
Welcome back to Tenacious Talks. My name is Carrie Ann, and before the break, we were chatting with Cara Bjornson, and she was sharing her personal story of sexual assault and abuse from when she was a child. And now we really want to get into why she's choosing to speak up now. So Cara, welcome back. Thank you for holding on.
Thank you.
Thank you. I understand, before we get into the how, I think that it's important to let people know that you do have an upcoming memoir that is going to be sharing that personal journey in a much more greater detail. So let's talk a little bit how you have used your past to fuel your passion for the future. So let's start with, what was the most challenging part of your journey?
Ooh, there were There were a lot of challenging parts to my journey. I think probably one of the most would have been if I did not speak up. I think to continue to be silent would have been more challenging than the challenge of sharing it. But believing that I was worth the healing was one of my challenges, because I didn't have any self-worth. I didn't have any self-esteem. I just felt like this damaged, broken person that had these horrible things happen. And I believed that that defined me and that made up who I was. So that was definitely a challenge. And finding my voice to speak up about what happened was too, because I was so conditioned by the people who abused me to think that it was my fault or no one would believe me. So the threats that were made to keep me quiet were hanging over my head so many years later, even though I wasn't exposed to these people anymore, but I was living as though I was, because in my head, they were still very real. You know, people would say to me, it's over, you're safe now. But I didn't really believe that, because inside my mind, I was still remembering it so clearly that it was like happening again all of the time, over and over and over. So I had to work really, really hard on grounding myself in the present moment and what I knew to be true about my environment right now to show myself that I was safe.
Right. And so you're a coach, you support people now. So tell us a little bit about that journey, about becoming a coach and really starting to helping others do what you've done.
You know, I was really fortunate, really, really blessed to have a few people just be so on board supportive, just 150%, and walk with me through the darkest, scariest, most overwhelming moments of my process to heal. And I know firsthand how much that means to have someone who just can say, I believe you, and it wasn't your fault, and you're a lovable, beautiful, wonderful person. And I started to think, like, well, how can I give that back to other people? Because sexual assault, rape, sexual abuse, there are still topics that are fairly taboo. And, as a survivor, I know what it's like to share my story and have people like scatter like cockroaches because they don't know what to do with it and they don't know what to say. And one of the reasons that I specialize in trauma recovery and abuse assault recovery as a coach is because I want to give others the safe place that some very special people gave me to start to heal.
So what is your specialty?
I specialize in trauma recovery, grief, loss, relationship, communication issues, building self-esteem, self-confidence, empowerment, all of the things that affected me the most when I was healing as a result of trauma of any kind, specifically, abuse and assault, but trauma of any kind.
So in your coaching practice, what are some of the skills that you teach your clients?
Well, one of the things that seems to be, even before I realized exactly what my specialty was, I mean, it would seem obvious, but it wasn't to me at first. One of the things that kept coming up was that I started to have clients come to me that needed to find their empowered voice. They wanted to speak their truth. They wanted to talk about the things that had happened to them so that they could get it out and they could release these secrets that they were holding. So I help people be able to find their voice, speak their truth, and speak it with the knowledge that it's okay, without shame, without fear, without feeling like they're doing something wrong for sharing their experience.
So when someone signs up to be a client with you in your coaching practice, what can they expect? What would the framework look like? Is it group sessions or private coaching sessions? What would that look like for them?
It kind of depends. I mean, it's individual for each client. There's the option of private sessions. So we talk maybe once a week, sometimes every other week, depending on the person. And that can be done on the phone, through Skype, and in person. I also offer different empowerment workshops, live workshops that are either 1 or 2 day events. I offer little mini workshops. I do book groups. I do a whole lot of things because everyone's process is so different that no two people are going to heal the same. So I like to offer a lot of options so that people can choose what feels right for them.
Mm-hmm. So something that there's a question that I keep wanting to go back to. We understand, I have a better understanding of your history and your why, but why now? Why are you choosing to speak out now?
Well, I'm choosing to speak out now because last year I experienced more sexual assault. And that was probably one of the things that I was most afraid of as an adult experiencing it again.
Mm-hmm.
And when it happened, and it was a couple of different occasions, I realized that I was dealing with the survivor shame again. I was kind of, curling into myself emotionally and sort of withdrawing a little. And I know I need to do that on some level to heal and make sense of what happened. But I started looking at why I was doing it. Was I doing it because I needed to just have some time for myself? Or was I doing it because I was ashamed? And one of the people who was inappropriate with me was someone that I trusted and knew about my history and my fear of it happening again. And when I disconnected from this person and his family, they began to say really damaging things about me, really personal and professionally untrue, damaging things because they were very upset that I couldn't be controlled by them. They're very manipulative. And I was very quiet. I wasn't speaking up on my own behalf. And then all of a sudden it occurred to me, why am I not? Why am I not saying anything? I know that I didn't do anything wrong. So I started to post on social media about my experience and about sexual assault awareness. And that was really scary for me at first because, the majority of my social media contacts did not know that I had this history unless they, saw me at a talk or something. It's not like I speak about it in everyday conversation. But when I started to post about it, the response was, powerfully amazing. It started to get shares and comments and likes, and I started to receive messages from people that I knew and from people that I didn't know who courageously told me that they had experienced some kind of sexual assault as well. And some of these people were telling me this and said, I've never told anybody else this before, ever. And when that started to happen, I thought, you know what? I want to keep speaking. I want to speak more. I want to be louder. I want to share to a wider audience. And I want people to know that it's okay to talk about it and that you're not alone.
So powerful and such a great, the reason that you started to speak out now is, it's bittersweet because you had to experience it again. Yet the end result of it is so much more impactful than it ever would have been if you hadn't had gone through this awareness and become more in connection with your emotions. How differently, if you haven't, so for someone who maybe hasn't done this, the work and hasn't faced their in court and hasn't gone through the emotional work, what would be some of the thoughts or feelings that people would be experiencing now, not realizing it's shame and guilt that they're that victim shame? So what would be some of what are some of the things that people might be experiencing without realizing it?
I think it kind of depends on the survivor personally, but, we all have ways that we cope with not dealing with something. So one of the biggest things for me was like a shame about myself as a person, a shame about my body, being a woman, just kind of a generalized self-loathing. Some people who experience abuse, they go the other direction and they, they become very much more free with their bodies. And some people totally withdraw and become afraid of intimacy, become afraid of sex. And I had a lot of shame about being seen in a bathing suit, being seen in my underwear. I mean, as a theater performer, you change in front of other people. And I used to be called the contortionist because I could change my entire costume without exposing like an inch of my skin because I was so ashamed of myself. There's often a feeling of grief and loss, which I came to understand during my own healing process because I thought, well, I didn't, lose and nobody died. But it was the grief and the loss of my innocence, of my childhood, of the things that might have been different if these events hadn't occurred. There are a lot of signs and symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, that we're not necessarily aware of when we've been abused and assaulted. We just kind of live with this heightened state of anxiety, and we don't know any different. We think that that's just who we are and how we are, when really it's because on some level we're still waiting for that abuse to happen again because we don't know that it's over. We don't know that we're safe. Does that make sense?
It does. It does make sense. I've experienced some sexual abuse more in my college years and adult years, more so than my childhood. But it does make sense. There's this sense of grief or loss, and you can't really understand where it's coming from. But when you put it all in context, it makes sense. So it's really good. What you said really makes sense. And I think our listeners will have a good understanding of what that is, and if they have experienced it and they're still continuing to feel those things, that they know it's okay to talk about it, and that you will understand and support them as they move through that journey of their personal journey of, would you say, dealing with it? Is that the right word to use?
I guess healing. From it would be, I guess it would be healing something that feels like maybe it could never be healed, but it doesn't make it not have happened. It doesn't erase it from, my story or my memories, but it does become something that is not so acute. I don't relive it every day the way that I used to.
And on that note, we do need to wrap up our conversation. But before we do, what is the one thing you want other survivors to know?
One thing is tough.
Well, what do you want? What do you want other survivors to know?
The first thing that I think of is, what happened to you is not your fault, and the shame that you feel is not yours. There's so much I could go into about that, but just, to say that much, and that no one has the right to judge your healing process ever. And I think one of the biggest things for me was something I learned from a very wise woman who blessed me with her support for many, many years during my darkest times. And she taught me that the healing is in the feeling, and that you talk about it until you don't need to talk about it anymore. And when I was in the midst of my stuff, I'd be like, I'm so tired of talking about it. I don't want to need to do this anymore. And she kept saying, I know, but the healing is in the sharing and the feeling. And look at how long you held all this inside. It's okay to keep talking about it. Talk about it until you don't need to talk about it anymore. And I did. And I didn't really believe her. I thought, like, well, what do you mean? Till I don't need to talk about it anymore? Like, how will I know when that is? Isn't it just better to like shut up and move on? But I'd been doing that my whole life, and all that got me was more pain. And then one day I didn't really need to talk about it as much anymore, and it became less and less and less. So I think that's the one thing I would really want survivors to know. And it's something that I'm actually in the process of creating a blog entry about because it's so important. So I will definitely be going into more detail about that through my website, within the next week. Talk about it until you don't need to talk about it anymore.
I can resonate with that. It's such wonderful advice. Just keep talking about it. So impactful, Cara. How can people find you? We do need to wrap up. So how
Sure.
can people find you on the website and read your blogs and find out how to work with you?
My website is www.carathelifecoach.com, and that's Cara with a C. And if you go on my website, there's links to my social media, there's my email, there's a phone number, my blog is on there. So that's pretty much the best way for people to reach me just in general, and then they can decide how they want to connect with me if they choose to.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for your willingness to be vulnerable and just really share your story with us today. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot, and I know our listeners have as well.
Oh, thank you for letting me. It's been an honor.
Thank you. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your day, and I have a feeling Cara will be back on the network very soon. So we will talk with you all later. Take care.
Are you interested in appearing on Tenacious Talks? Do you have a tenacious spirit and transformational story to share? Carrie Ann wants to hear from you. Contact her at www.tlrstation.com. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.